All right, thank you. And we're going to switch to our next speaker, Waji Naqvi. He's going to continue on that last bullet that Jerry was talking about, this oxygen deficiency in the water column off the North Indian Ocean.
Okay, good afternoon. Let me first of all thank the organizers for inviting me to be here. India is far away, as is the Indian Ocean. It's midnight in my country. I'm going to speak on oxygen deficiency in the water column of the North Indian Ocean. Most of the introductory part has already been taken care of by previous speakers, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But let me tell you, there are important issues related to oxygen deficiency in the ocean. I'm going to address them. First of all, why is the oxygen deficiency in the ocean important? There are a number of areas that have oxygen deficiency to varying extents. The Indian Ocean is one of the most severely affected area in terms of the oxygen depletion in the water column. But there are other regions as well, particularly in the Eastern Pacific. Why are these areas important? They're important because they play a very major role in biogeochemical processes, because of the transformations that take place in the absence of oxygen, particularly nitrogen transformations and denitrification, is the conversion of nitrate to molecular nitrogen, which removes the biologically active form, converts it into a form which is not readily available, and plays an important role in the global nitrogen cycle. And in the absence of denitrification, the atmospheric nitrogen content would be depleted in a few tens of billion years. Denitrification also leads to production of nitrous oxide, which is an important greenhouse gas. And the water column denitrification accounts for about 100 million tons of nitrogen production on our planet. So it's a very important player. And of course, the oceans are losing oxygen, as has already been pointed out. There's this famous paper by Stroma that says that the rate of oxygen depletion in the ocean within the OMGs of the Eastern Pacific and the Eastern Atlantic Ocean ranges between 0.09 and 0.37 micromole per kg per year. And let me point out that at this rate, these data actually come from the Eastern Pacific and the Eastern Atlantic. And if you were to apply the same rates to the Indian Ocean, large parts of the Indian Ocean would have already become anoxic. So I do not think that these rates actually apply to the Indian Ocean. I'm going to argue in this talk that there isn't a great deal of deoxygenation going on in the northern Indian Ocean. I'm going to present evidence, particularly from the Bay of Bengal, which I'm going to show you has remained on the verge of being anoxic for 35,000 years. So there is sedimentary evidence in addition to the water column observations that we have. What's unique about the oxygen minimum zone of the Indian Ocean is that unlike the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, the most severe depletion of oxygen in the Indian Ocean occurs in the northern basins, in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. This, of course, is related to the unique geographical setting, which is the low latitude northern boundary. And what has not been mentioned is the porous eastern boundary, which allows the water from the Pacific to flow into the Indian Ocean, the Indonesian through flow, which actually plays a very important role in the surface circulation in the eastern Indian Ocean. And that's an important factor why we do not get the kind of eastern boundary upwelling systems that we get in the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. These four eastern boundary upwelling systems are actually absent in the Indian Ocean, and in the Indian Ocean, as has been pointed out, the most intense upwelling occurs in the northwest, in the Arabian Sea. So that is what actually differentiates the northern Indian Ocean from the other oceanic basins. So this is one reason why we get the most intense oxygen minimum in the Arabian Sea. But in the Arabian Sea itself, there is this kind of mismatch between the centers of the most intense upwelling and productivity and winter convection. There's a mismatch between these centers and the area where the oxygen minimum is the most intense. So here is what has been already pointed out, the zone where the nitrite concentration is in excess of about 0.5 micromoles per liter. And this is the zone of denitrification, where nitrate is converted into molecular nitrogen. And within this zone, the oxygen concentration is actually very close to zero, below detection limit of the most modern technology that we have. Let me also point out that just outside this zone in the Western Arabian Sea, the concentrations are slightly above zero, but it's still much less than the concentrations that you see in the other OMZs. That's less than less than 5 micromoles. So the absence of denitrification in the Western Arabian Sea is partly because of the better ventilation in the Western Arabian Sea, as has already been pointed out, and also because of the shallower remineralization of organic matter offshore due to iron and silicon deficiency, something that Jim Moffitt alluded to. But despite the variability that Jerry just pointed out, this zone of denitrification has remained remarkably stable over the last 40 years at least. There is some variability, there is some fluctuation in the west particularly, and that may occur on the seasonal scale. But I do not think that there is a compelling evidence that this zone is actually expanding. So there may be changes related to advection of oxygen, relatively oxygen-rich waters from the south, which makes this zone shrink maybe during the southwest monsoon. But otherwise, the boundaries have remained stable for nearly 4 decades that I have actually worked in this system. To give the idea of, to give you a better idea of the spatial extent of this zone, the denitrification zone, I have plotted here the nitrite concentrations along 2 sections, one running from the Indian coast to the Omani coast here, and the other one from the south to the north, about 8 degree north latitude to the Omani coast. So both of these sections actually, traverse the oxygen minimum zone, the denitrification zone here. Also included in this figure are the oxygen concentrations in micromoles per liter, and you can see the OMZ. In the OMZ, the oxygen concentration is much less than 5 micromolar. The concentrations were determined by different techniques. Actually, the data come from SK209, the cruise that Jim Moffitt referred to, and Thomas Thomson cruise 039, which was a part of the Jagos cruise, and these were sampled about 10 years apart, but still the geographical, the spatial extent of the denitrification zone had not changed much. These oxygen concentrations were determined by following the more precise calorimetric technique, and they are much lower than what we get in this case. And if you compare the nitrite concentration with the distribution of oxygen, you would see that most of the nitrite is restricted to oxygen concentrations of less than 1 micromolar. And more recently, people have measured the oxygen concentration using the Stock sensors. And it has been found that the concentrations within this zone are well below the detection limit of the Stock electrode, which is less than 10 nanomolar. So the system is functionally anoxic, actually. This zone occupies only about 3% of the area of the total volume of the Arabian Sea, but it supports 1/3 of the global water column denitrification. So it's it's globally significant in terms of its geochemical importance. Within this zone, there is, of course, nitrite accumulation. There is a minimum in nitrate, which means that nitrate is being converted, is being reduced to nitrite and perhaps beyond. we get low concentrations, very low concentrations of nitrite, of nitrous oxide and 2O. So there is a maximum above this zone, there is a minimum, there is a maximum below this, but within the secondary nitrite maximum zone, the concentration of N2O goes through a minimum, and that would indicate that here the nitrous oxide is being reduced to molecular nitrogen. And we also see large deficits in combined nitrogen at the same depth. And these are calculated by using two methods. Is the nitrate deficit using the N star from Gruber and Sarmiento, and its nitrate deficit from Cardis-Potti's paper in 2001. Now, to show that that this nitrogen is this deficit actually is going into production of molecular nitrogen, we have plotted the nitrogen argon ratio at 5 stations, 3 of which were located within the secondary nitrite maximum zone, whereas 2 others were located outside. The 2 outside are shown in red symbols, the ones inside are shown in blue, and you can see there is a large increase in nitrogen to argon ratio within the same depth range where the nitrite maximum is found. And we can convert this axis N2 to argon ratio to actual concentration of molecular nitrogen. You would see that the concentrations, the excess nitrogen concentrations, N2 concentrations match very well with the computed deficit. So we are reasonably certain that the losses that we see in the combined nitrogen can be accounted for by the buildup of molecular nitrogen in the same waters. Okay, while it's known that that this is a region where N2O is being produced, the pathways of nitrous oxide production of N2 production are still being debated. There are 2 possible pathways. N2 could be produced through denitrification or through NMOX. And both these are very different processes. Denitrification, of course, is a heterotrophic process in which the organic matter is oxidized using nitrate through nitrite, nitric oxide, nitrous oxide, and eventually to molecular nitrogen. Whereas NMOX is an autotrophic process in which ammonium is oxidized by nitrite to produce N2 and H2O. There are a couple of studies, and the results of them are completely contrasting. The group led by Beswart from Princeton carried out observations at these 2 stations, number 1 and number 2. They measured rates of N2 production using labeled tracers and found that that denitrification was the dominant pathway of N2 production at these 2 stations. And this was done on a cruise of Roger Revelle in 2007. So these are rates, and these are gene copy numbers for denitrifying an NMOX organism. And as consistent with the rates, the molecular data also suggests that denitrification is more important than NMOX in the Arabian Sea. At about the same time, in fact, the same season in 2007, a month later, the Germans had a cruise to the Arabian Sea, the very same region. They also carried out observations at 2 stations. The data from 2 stations are presented here. This is a paper published by Lamb, Fritz Lamb and others in Biogeosciences, and they get completely different results. The data here come from 2 stations. 957 is inside the denitrification zone, and 946 is just off the Omani coast. Here are the rates given in these connected curves, and these bars give the gene expression for the corresponding gene. And you will find that even within the denitrification zone, actually the denitrification rates are not given here, but they were not detectable. The rate of GNRA was dissimilatory nitrate reduction to ammonium. This is rate of NMOX. They were all insignificant within the oxygen minimum zone. What was significant, however, was the rate of nitrate conversion to reduction of nitrate to nitrite. So their conclusion was that within the secondary nitrite maximum, nitrate can only be reduced to nitrite and not beyond. Is then oxidized back to nitrate. So not much is happening within the secondary nitrite maximum zone. Outside the secondary nitrite maximum zone of the coast of Oman, they postulated that dissimilatory nitrate reduction to ammonium combines with NMOX to produce N2. So these findings are completely in disagreement with each other. However, there are other evidences which suggest the occurrence of denitrification. Here is the isotopic evidence, the natural abundance of N15 in nitrate, in molecular nitrogen, and you can see that there is a buildup of there is an enrichment of N15 at the depth where the secondary nitrite maximum is found. At the same depth, we get a minimum in del N15 of N2, which means that the product is isotopically much lighter than the reactant. So this is an evidence for the occurrence of denitrification in this system. We also have a large data set on dual isotopic composition of nitrous oxide, which also show extremely large enrichment of both the isotopes, N15 and O18, within the secondary nitrite maximum zone. So there is a lot happening within the secondary nitrite maximum zone, which is really a hotspot of biogeochemical changes for redox processes, not only of nitrogen system, but also other elements as well, polyvalent elements as well. Like iodate, for example, within the secondary nitrite maximum zone, iodate is reduced to iodide. We have reduction of Mn4 to Mn2, which was reported by Luther's group, and we have reduction of Fe3 to Fe2, which has been reported by Jim Moffitt. So we get reduction of a number of polyvalent elements in the same at the same depth range. Now here are some very intriguing data set recently collected, not published so far, that indicate that these processes are extremely sensitive to oxygen concentration. So minor changes in the oxygen concentration. What we have here is data from a station, number 4, located within the denitrification zone. We have temperature profile in red, salinity in blue, and we have oxygen in magenta color, and we have beam attenuation coefficient, which you get from the beam attenuation, which you get from the transmissometer. And you can see there is a maximum in beam attenuation within the same depth range where we get the secondary nitrite maximum. And here the secondary nitrite maximum is shown in red. And this shaded portion is where the secondary nitrite maximum is located. And if you look at this carefully, you will see that the shape and structure of the secondary nitrite maximum zone and of beam attenuation coefficient are very similar. And they occur within exactly the same depth range. We also plotted the total bacterial biomass, which is shown in blue here. And it has been reported from other oceanic areas that this particle maximum, which we see in the beam attenuation or transmission profile, is actually created by the bacteria, which means that the high bacterial biomass within the secondary nitrite maximum zone is the source of the increased turbidity. And one of the reasons that has been invoked for this is the is the lack of grazing of bacteria, which means that the oxygen concentrations are so low that the organisms that graze upon bacteria are excluded from the secondary nitrite maximum zone. Now, what we did on this occasion is that we also counted the heterotrophic nanoflagellates that graze on bacteria, and their number is shown in green here. So these are the counts. The green curve gives the heterotrophic nanoflagellate abundance. And to our surprise, we found that their number was actually not very low, but they were fairly abundant, which means that if the food was more abundant, they were also there in large numbers. We have another profile from a station located further to the west from within the oxygen minimum zone. This is very similar to the profile we see at station 4. The only difference is that this maximum has now split into two, and that's because of the advection of a water mass at this depth around 200 meters that we can see from the salinity profile here. So there is water that came from the south that has slightly higher oxygen concentration. It penetrated into the oxygen minimum zone, and it split this nitrite into two. And you can see the signatures of this in the particle maximum, in the bacterial biomass maximum, and also in the hydrotrophic nanoflagellate counts. The number is still very high. Just outside the secondary nitrite maximum zone at station 20, we don't see any of these extrema. We don't see here the oxygen concentration is slightly higher because it's just outside the secondary nitrite maximum zone. We do not see any nitrite maximum. We do not see any bacterial maximum, and the total number of heterotrophs, the counts of heterotrophic nanoflagellate is also fairly moderate. So it's not that the anoxic zone excludes the grazers from the system, and most of the increase in bacterial biomass is not because of the suppressed mortality. What these data show is that the anaerobic pathways are extremely sensitive to oxygen concentration. This is what we also see when we compare data from the Arabian Sea with the data from the Bay of Bengal. Here are two stations located at about the same latitude, about 18 degree north, 19 degree north in the Arabian Sea. This one is located within the zone of active denitrification, plotted in solid symbols. The other one is from the Bay of Bengal, the open symbols, and you can see this is oxygen, and you cannot distinguish the oxygen concentrations within the oxygen minimum zone of the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. But if you look at the nitrate profile, they are completely divergent. At this depth, the concentration of nitrate in the Bay of Bengal is about half of what we see in the Arabian Sea, despite the fact that the oxygen concentrations are very similar. And what is most important is that we do not see any nitrite concentration. We do not see any secondary nitrite in the Bay of Bengal. Now, there have been more recent observations in this region. In fact, only last year on a cruise of Sagar Kanya, where we measured the oxygen concentrations using the Stock sensors. And these data are presented in a manuscript which is in review by this Bristow. Lara Bristow is the senior author. The minimum oxygen concentration that we measured on this cruise using the Stock sensor is only about 10 to 100 nanomole range. It's within 10 to 100 nanomole range. And if you look at the minimum, the minimum rate of change that Stroma have reported, Stroma et al. Have reported, is about 90 nanomolar. So, as I said earlier, I mean, with that kind of a change, decrease in oxygen concentration, this oxygen would be depleted in less than 1 year. There is no secondary nitrite maximum. There is a slight excess of N2, as we have seen in the Arabian Sea, but not much. We see some enrichment of N15 in nitrate, not much. What is most important is that the microbial populations in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal are not too different. And the rates of denitrification and nanomox are pretty low. We also have some data, sedimentary data. This is a unpublished manuscript by Tim Rickson, where the del N15 of nitrate is plotted, del N15 of sedimentary organic matter are plotted versus age. And this is a well-dated core coming from the northern Bay of Bengal, somewhere here. And the del N15 values remain within a very tight range, narrow range of between 4 and 5 per mil. Is slightly lower than the average composition of average del N15 value of nitrate, which is around 6. So this would indicate that at least in the last 35,000 years, the denitrification in the Arabian Sea had never been so prominent because in systems which are strongly denitrifying, such as the Arabian Sea, you get values as high as 8 to 9 per mil. And in the Bay of Bengal, it remains well within the range of 1 per mil over 35,000 years, which is very remarkable. What it would imply is that the Bay of Bengal has remained at least has not become strongly reducing in the past 35,000 years. So this kind of, the conditions that we see today, where the system is on verge of being denitrifying, but not quite so, have not changed over the past 35,000 years. At least the system has not crossed over to anoxia. And that's really important. Now, why doesn't the Bay of Bengal turn anoxic? I believe that first of all, the respiration rates in the water column are low, partly because the export production is low, and partly because of the ballast effect. That means that the lithogenic particles make the sedimentation of the water column make the particles sink through the water column rapidly, and there is not much of degradation within the water column itself, which would also mean that more fresh material would reach the seafloor in the Bay of Bengal as compared to the Arabian Sea. Now, Ken Johnson was speaking yesterday of the near bottom regeneration and the anomalies, and I don't think there is a better case there can be a better example than this of sedimentary, of benthic remineralization. Here are the profiles from a few geosex stations, and these were repeated later in early 2000. This is paper from, these data come from Gordon et al., 2002. Here's nitrate concentration, it's oxygen concentration, close to the benthic boundary layer. We see a distinct increase in the nitrate concentration and a corresponding decrease in oxygen. And these decreases, and this decrease and the increase are in the proportions of the Redfield stoichiometry, which means that the material is not derived from land, it's actually the one is marine, it's supplied from the surface of the ocean, from the surface layer. There could also be very small changes in physics, such as better oxygenation, that lead to better oxygenation of the oxygen minimum zone through vertical mixing. So there may be some subtle changes in the physics that may also be important, but I think most important is the low decomposition rate or demineralization rate of organic matter in the water column itself. I think the Bay of Bengal and also the western part of the Arabian Sea are in a state of what would be called a metabolic hole, where the oxygen concentrations are low, but not low enough for denitrification to take place. So the anaerobic pathways are not triggered because there is some oxygen present, and it's very hard to remove complete oxygen unless you overload that system with organic matter. So there is a combination of kinetic and thermodynamic factors that keep the system both in the Western Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal into a state of metabolic hole, where the oxygen concentrations are too low. They don't allow the aerobic pathways to be very important, but not low enough for denitrification and other anaerobic pathways to become important. So as I said, traces of oxygen are probably hard to remove. Bay of Bengal is not the only region where you see this happening. You also see similar conditions in other systems like the Gulf of California, the California borderland basins. The same thing happens there. The system is very close to being anoxic, but not quite so. And if deoxygenation was to occur at the rates that have been reported, all those systems should now have become anoxic. The fact that they have not become anoxic indicates that those rates do not actually apply globally. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about the differences that we have also between the Western Arabian Sea and the Eastern Arabian Sea. The coast of Oman versus the coast of India. Both the systems experience upwelling. Of the Omani coast, the upwelling is much faster, much more rapid, much more vigorous than we have of the Indian coast. Of the Indian coast, we also get upwelling, but it's very slow. Also, this is the only region, the coast of India, where upwelling occurs in conjunction with large land runoff. It's the only system, upwelling zone, where this happens. And this is something that you can see from the profiles of salinity and temperature. You can see fairly low temperature, about 22 degrees Celsius in the upwelled water. But this is overlain by a fresher layer which is produced due to land runoff and local precipitation. This is over the coast off the coast of India. Along the Omani coast, it doesn't happen. There's no runoff. The upwelling is very intense. The water comes up very rapidly, is advected away thousands of kilometers, at least 1,000 kilometers away from the coast, very rapidly. The residence time of water over the shelf is very small, very short as compared to the residence time of water over the Indian shelf. So that accounts for large differences in the biogeochemistry of these two shelves. Of the Omani shelf, we do not see any denitrification, so nitrite concentrations are close to zero. Over the Indian shelf, we get very high concentration of nitrite, in this case as much as 15 micromolar. And there is a definite decrease in nitrate in waters close to the bottom, which indicates that there is denitrification taking place in the system. So while this system over the shelf of India, western shelf of India, turns anoxic and reducing, is not the case of the Omani coast, even though the upwelling, and actually because the upwelling is a lot more rapid of the coast of Oman. So we see extreme conditions, complete loss of nitrate, and onset of sulfate reduction over the Indian shelf as compared to the Omani shelf. But this system, this reducing system, is not actually contiguous with the offshore suboxic zone. I'm going to skip this. We have data from okay, so what happens along the coast of India is that this water comes up. The water comes up from offshore, just off the shelf, which is not quite anoxic. During the peak upwelling season, which is like September, October, it covers the entire shelf, and the total area is about 200,000 square kilometers. And this is world's largest coastal low oxygen zone. Once it comes up, while it's coming up, it undergoes changes. It loses the initial oxygen concentration. The system first becomes reducing, suboxic, which means denitrification takes place. But once it comes closer to the coast, ascends to the inner shelf, it becomes completely anoxic, and there is accumulation of ammonium. What is also most interesting about this system is that there is huge buildup of nitrous oxide, and this is largely through reductive process, through denitrification. So it's the only shelf that I know of where you can have anoxic, suboxic, and hypoxic environment occurring over the same shelf segment. They are very clear zonation, and it's one of the largest producer of nitrous oxide in the world. Okay, so in conclusion, while the oceanic OMGs and coastal hypoxic zones have been reported to be expanding, we find no clear evidence for this happening either in coastal waters or in offshore OMG. It's not clear what keeps the Bay of Bengal in the state of near anoxia that it is in, but should the system become anoxic in response to changes in productivity or slowdown of circulation, is going to have a huge biogeochemical impact. Thank you very much.
Now we're about to take a short, stretch your legs, and maybe if your hands can work quickly with coffee break. Well, you heard it from Heather in the front. I was not going to say 5 minutes, but we're going to have a discussion period later for this afternoon, so I would ask that everyone who has a question for Waji or any of the other speakers wait till then. Take a quick run, jog, coffee, and be back in 5 minutes at 3:30.